And welcome back. We're going to be kicking off the afternoon program here for the 2025 New England Rowing Championships in just a few moments. Our first race of the afternoon is going to be, well, it's going to be crowning our first New England Rowing Champions of the year. We have our women's third varsity four getting pulled into the stake boats now. We have a 5-boat race for our first grand final, and it's the Billy Bilotta Cup that they'll be racing for this afternoon. We have a 5-boat final. In lane 1, Bowdoin. In lane 2, Amherst A. In lane 3, University of lane 4, Wesleyan. And in lane 5, the Amherst B entry.
And it looks like conditions have absolutely changed drastically from this morning. I don't know if you can hear the wind as we are sitting outside close to the 500 meter mark, but the winds are now pretty much doubled. This morning probably was about 3 to 4 miles per hour steady winds, but now it is 10 miles per hour steady winds with 23 miles per hour gusts. And so this is now a different ball game than what we experienced from this morning. So a lot of the times whatnot for the most part are going to be slower because it is in headwind, and 23 miles per hour, going against you, that will slow you down. Mother Nature always wins.
That is so true. And in particular in these women's fours, these are going to be some very long races that these athletes are going to be setting themselves up for this afternoon. The women's four is already a pretty slow event, and with the added conditions, we are really in for gladiator event, I would say, lining ourselves up for these third varsity fours. But again, as I mentioned earlier in the morning session, Lake Quinsigamond is a very familiar venue to all of the crews that are going to be racing here today, with the exception maybe of our first years or our freshmen who are getting their first exposure to Lake Quinsigamond and the conditions here. If they're not local New England athletes, they're going to know kind of what's going to be in store for them. Both just from having been in the warm-up here this afternoon, but also having raced here probably several times, maybe even already this season. So some familiarity with the way that Worcester and Lake Quinsigamond can behave on race day. We're getting a pretty classic Lake Quinsig moment here this afternoon with these conditions. But again, these athletes train in all kinds of weather conditions day in and day out, both in practice and in racing, so it's nothing that they are not already prepared to handle.
Absolutely. Again, first day on Lake Q, and I'm realizing that again the wind is it's a doozy. It really is a doozy here.
Let's hope it's not too much of a doozy for these athletes as they get underway. We are looking up at the start line here, and we can see our crews are all present. They're not quite where they might need to be for race time that was scheduled to start 1 minute ago. So maybe just handling the conditions up there, and maybe it's just a little bit more chaotic with the start line officials having to keep things in order, with the wind being a little bit more of a factor for these third varsity fours. And this is an interesting event here at the New England Rowing Championships. Maurice and I were talking a little bit about how different programs might prioritize entries in different events, depending on what their program needs and what their talent pool is. What we're seeing in a lot of these four events, all of which actually the fours today are all straight finals. We didn't have any preliminary rounds of racing for any of the fours. Is that we have programs that are racing these fours that are primarily more our club teams. So the teams that are going to be racing are looking toward the ACRA championships later in the spring, where the four is more of a priority event or the premier event at the ACRAs. So they're going to be prioritizing these fours, the first, second, and third varsity fours for their programs. A lot of them, we're seeing that with Bowdoin, we're seeing that with Amherst and UNH in particular. All their men and women are really focusing on these fours this weekend here at New England.
Yeah, and again, with speaking of ACRAs, having that four as a premier event, I'm glad that it is, because again, as we talked about before, different clubs have different resources, have different depths of their programs, and so having the four, you're able to fill more fours with a smaller program than 8. And so that just creates the inclusive environment for rowing across the board, and allows whether you're a small club or a large club to be competitive somewhere at some point.
Absolutely, it does. And one more thing that we can talk about while we have some more time here, kicking off this third Varsity 4 final, is the point scoring for all of our team trophies that will be awarded this afternoon. As I mentioned in the morning session, we have multiple trophies that are up for grabs, along with all the medals and individual events. And we're going to be looking at a team points trophy for the women's teams, a team point trophy for the men's teams, and then an overall team trophy that will include point totals for the men and for the women. So our first team points will be on offer in this event, the women's third Varsity 4. Not a lot of points on offer. This event is going to be the smallest point scoring opportunity for all of our teams today. So we're going to start it off with 6 points for our first place finisher in this event, and then 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 for all of our entries. Well, we don't have 6 entries, so just 6 to 2 is going to be the math there. Already kicking it off, showing you how good I am with numbers and math. No one should trust me with this scoring system, but there you have it. Our first points will be on offer here, nonetheless, in this women's third Varsity 4.
And again, I think the lower you go in terms of the varsity level, so 1V, 2V, 3V, 4V, from the 8s to the 4s, I feel like the lower you go, the more chip you have, on your shoulder. And we talked about it earlier this morning that, some of these programs, like some programs do prioritize that, but when you're looking at your bigger programs, typically your varsity 4s, and then first varsity 4 on down is the ones that did not make the varsity 8s. And so some of these athletes are they're fighting for a spot into some of those bigger boats as well. And so this is something that your coaches are looking at as you're coming on down the line, and they're seeing the times that you put down. Obviously the times are going to vary because this weather is kind of crazy, but this is kind of where you show your stuff leading up to, again, the big dance and NCAAs and whatnot. And so I think again, I think it's special to see some of these boats race typically on that lower end, because that's where the heart comes out, and proving their worth to the team.
Well, it seems like we're experiencing some sort of delay, and it hasn't been communicated to us yet what that might be, if we're having some sort of mechanical or if it is just a logistical issue with the steering. So we're going to go off mic for a little bit and come back to you when it seems like we might be ready for a start. So we'll be back with you shortly. right, so we do have our crews successfully attached to all of their stake boats. Hopefully that means that we should be getting underway very shortly.